there is a show called Molly of Denali. It's produced by WGBH, Boston Public Television, and it's set in Alaska and is voiced by Indigenous actors. The main characters are Gwich'in and Koyukon, some of the northerlymost Indigenous peoples in North America. PBS Kids, we're talking like a little kids cartoon show, right? And like a good one because it's PBS. The show was launched in 2019, which is 4 years after Mount Denali had been officially unrenamed Mount McKinley. And the Soul Matters pre-K and elementary packets for this week suggest a group watch of one of the episodes. Right now, when you go to the PBS Kids website or app and go to the Molly of Denali page, it's literally one of the first suggested episodes. So if you're tuning in virtually or don't have time to stay for faith formation or aren't invited to the Wiggle Room faith formation group, the episode's floating around out there. And I'm going to slightly spoil the episode here, just a little. The episode follows Molly and her friends as they search for Molly's grandfather's drum. See, Molly's grandfather, like many other Indigenous people, was a survivor of the childhood trauma of forced boarding schools. And he had stopped singing when he had been told, like many, many children were, that he absolutely must stop speaking his language or singing his songs. And in order to help him find his songs so that they could hear them, they must find his drum. It works out. It's adorable. It's cute. They use the research, find the drum. Everything's fine. It's a PBS Kids show. But the forced boarding schools of Alaska were in effect until 1976, for those not super familiar. And the model of re-education was a trauma mirrored in Indigenous communities across North America. I'm not going to go into details about the schools. They were bad news. Communities are still recovering. And this episode of Molly of Denali is one small way that the stories of that time are being held by those communities.
And this is part of why the UUA hymn books from the 1990s and early 2000s require such careful attention, because the cultural trauma in these communities, similar forced schooling, happened in the lower 48. It means that a lot of the music that came to the Unitarian Universalists either came under the dynamics that we now side-eye as manipulation, or even more incredibly, are just written by white people and Native inspired. While the same-aged Indigenous people were recovering from massive trauma at the hands of colonization. When I lived in Oklahoma, I met folks who had went to some of these re-education schools and had been through re-education.
Bingo. That's why the email thread surrounding hymn number 1073 happened this week. It was partially a copyright issue, but also it was like an intent issue. The hymn in our hymnal says Native American, and we've sung it that way with that attribution dozens of times as in our sanctuary as part of the service. Earlier this week, our administrator, Emily Adderhold, sent out the following email, quoted here with permission. I wanted to share some concern about number 1073, The Earth is Our Mother. I believe the song may be misattributed in the hymnal. It was on a 1986 album, The Circle is Cast by Libana. Spotify cites words and music by Libana. Other sources call it a Native American inspired song, and still other sources cite it as being a Wiccan or pagan song with Indigenous American influence. So I got that email and I started poking around and found notes online that say the song is often attributed to the Native American Hupa tribe from Northern California. However, it is also likely that this song is a dominant culture American song that was written in the style of Native American musical traditions rather than a traditional Native American piece.
Yeah, and this would never fly through today's cultural appropriation flowchart. Which Isn't that exactly the issue we just had with Ancient Mother earlier in the service?
Yeah. This is the second. Oh, our go-to songs from the UUA collections are actually not even by Indigenous people, let alone passing the cultural appropriation vibes conversation of the hour. But in this case, because of the copyright and attribution errors, the music team decided to swap out this hymn with a flute piece created by John Prescott, which means that it's still not indigenously sourced, but at least we know the source.
Yes. The interlude is Meditation, written by John Prescott for flute and drone in the style of Native American flute music, performed by John and Eva. The specific flute used to compose and perform it was made by Jerry Fretwell of Everton, Missouri, who is descended from the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation.